Don't these alliums look marvellous? But in fact, they're not some way-out sophisticated species. They're ordinary, common our garden leeks. At the end of last season, I lifted these out of my allotments in order to give myself more space for the winter digging, and I heeled them in here where they'd be handy for the kitchen. But inevitably, there were too many to eat, and some of them were left to go to seed. And they look so lovely that next year I'm determined to heel them in at the back of the border, where other plants will cover the rather scruffy foliage at the bottom, and I'll get the benefit of these beautiful flower heads. And do bear in mind too that this, of course, is the way that the old gardeners would save a few bob, by saving their own seed. And of course, nothing could be easier to grow. Well, later in the programme, Adrian Bloom looks at a family of annuals and perennials that are just as easy to grow and have been popular with gardeners for generations, the centaurias or cornflowers. With an eye on next year's flowers, I'll be reinvigorating some of my shrubs with the secateurs. And we meet a gardener with a fascinating perspective in her town garden in Shropshire. But first, we visit on Gardener's World quite a lot of gardens that are open to the public, from stately homes to mobile homes. But few of them are as interesting as the setup in the village of Catforth in Lancashire. This cottage garden belongs to Chris Moore, and it's full of mouth-watering herbaceous plants. It costs just £1 to walk around, and included in the price is a visit to Chris's next-door neighbour, Judith Bradshaw. And this is a very different garden, full of trees, shrubs, conifers and herbaceous plants. It extends to an acre, and it's maintained in immaculate condition by the use of labour-saving devices like weed-controlling mulches and ground cover plants like this Lamium maculatum aureum, which is ideal for a semi-shaded position. After a few years of experience, Judith has become something of an expert. What would you say, then, is the best of ground cover plants?
I think one of the best is Geranium macrorrhizum. It doesn't seem to have any faults that I can tell.
And of course you can grow that in dry shade
You
too.
can, yes, dry shade, full sunshine, anywhere, almost in dense shade, and it still flowers. It's got an attractive pink flower. You can get it in various shades, really, from white through to deep pink.
I love the foliage too, actually.
And the foliage is lovely, aromatic as well.
I can see you're getting worked up about this, because I know that you're besotted with geraniums, aren't you? In fact, you hold one of the national collections.
That's right.
It is an enormous genus, actually, isn't it? How many species do you grow?
I have over 300 species cultivars and subspecies at the moment.
It's a tremendous commitment, actually, isn't it, to do that? And,
it's very interesting, though, because I'm always on the lookout for another one.
Sure, yes. Well, you've got them ranging from, well, starting off with these little alpine ones.
That's Geranium cinereum, Barcinarium album. And that's a very low grower, needs good drainage, and so we dig in a lot of grit here and put pebbles round to stop the winter wet.
And that's full sun, so for the rock garden scree or
that's
something
right,
like that.
yes.
What's that little one in the front there? Lovely colour.
That's a new hybrid that Alan Bremner made. It hasn't a name yet, but one of its parents is Traversii. Now, Traversii isn't hardy here, but that one is, and the flower's very much like Traversii, so that's very useful for me.
Quite an advance,
yes. These tend to keep small on the rockery, but we do have much more spreading geraniums, such as the ones behind us that you can see over there, the Endressii.
And then there are clump formers too.
Yes, there seem to be geraniums for just about every position and every kind of spread. You've low spreaders, high geraniums, those for dry shade, those for sun, alpines. I think that's what I like about it, really.
Then you've got also the really dramatic ones, like this one over here. Now, this really is a noble plant. What is it?
That's Geranium palmatum.
It's super, isn't it? Is that easy to grow?
Yes, as long as it has a fairly sheltered position. It comes from the Canary Islands, so although it's harder here, we do give it a sheltered spot.
Yes, because you're in a fairly favoured position here,
Yes,
aren't you,
we
on the west coast, really? Yeah. But what a nice plant. And those seeds really illustrate why these plants are called crane spurs, don't they?
That's right, look just like a crane's
That's
bill,
right.
don't they?
Yeah. Do you ever propagate from seed?
We do, yes. In fact, that one you really have to propagate from seed because it has a basal clump you can't separate. But I'm frightened of hybridising. I have so many geraniums in the garden that it would be very easy for them to cross. And so if we want to collect them from seed, we try to grow them in Chris's garden next door so that they'll keep away from my geraniums and hopefully they'll be true.
So, Chris, the collecting of the geranium seed falls to you then. But it's a bit of a damp day today. Not, I would have thought, the ideal conditions.
No, absolutely not. You'd like the sun to be shining, but the seeds are ready to come off, so I've got to collect them, or else we'll have nothing to sow. This probably was green yesterday, and I don't know if you've noticed how these things work, but they just peel up and fly off.
Yeah. Apart from geraniums, Chris grows a wide range of herbaceous plants, including these sidalchids, and she plants them with the eye of an artist. One thing that I notice about the borders is the fact that you've got lots and lots of different colours in here, but there's not one jarring note at all. Now, what's your secret?
Well, I find that if I stick to two of the primary colours, for instance the red and the yellow, and then perhaps find a plant that has those colours in it, if you mix the red and the yellow, you get the orange. If you add more yellow, you get peach, and so it goes on.
OK, so what it is really then is that you take two primary colours and you can use any combination of those two and they will all match together. And then it gradually blends down here into the softer blues and the pinks.
Taking a crimson red there, the lithium, if you take the pale blue there of the geranium, if you mix those two together, you get the mauve, which works in with the campanula and the campanula over there, and there again it just works in.
Well, it certainly looks wonderful. If, like Chris Moore, you do collect geranium seed, it's best to sow it straight away, and you put it on the surface of some fairly gritty compost, just spreading it out like that, and cover it up with some coarse grit. Now then these can go outside, and some will germinate fairly quickly, but some varieties will wait until the spring, so don't throw them away too soon. Now, some geraniums will seed themselves around the border, and they'll normally be very welcome. But there are other plants that can become a real nuisance. And if you've ever grown the red valerian, you'll know exactly what I mean. And this is actually a lovely cottage garden plant, and I wouldn't be without it. But you can see here that it's actually got millions of seeds, and every one of them seems to germinate. Well, of course, it's quite easy to pull out the seedlings when they're young, but you can save yourself a lot of trouble by cutting them back now as soon as they've finished flowering and before they set seed. On the other hand, there are one or two plants that are well worth saving the seed from and sowing in controlled conditions. And I think that includes all the primulas. Polyanthus are probably the most popular of the primula family, and I had a wonderful show of them here last year. Now, when they finished flowering, I deliberately didn't cut them down so that I could save the seed. Now, the first thing you need to do is to make sure that you mark the bag you're going to collect them in, because you might not be able to recognise them once they've dried off. And then you simply look for the heads that are really quite brown and shove those in the bag. And there'll be dozens and dozens and dozens of seed in here, so you don't need all that many. And then take them away and hang them up to dry off. Now, the place to clean the seeds is inside or outside in the cool of the evening when the wind drops and the smell of the jasmine fills the little courtyard here. And you can see as you tip it out that there is quite a lot of seed that's already just come out of the heads. So it's worthwhile just shaking those out, the rest of them out, like this. But you will notice too that there's quite a bit of rubbish in amongst that seed, and it's on the chaff there that the fungus diseases lurk. So it's necessary to get rid of that. So what you need to do is to push all the seed up into the middle like this, and then gently blow it off. And believe me, this is a fine art. Now, you're bound to lose some of the seed when you do it, so bring it back into the middle again and blow it again. And that's reasonably clean. Now, the best bet is to sow this seed straight away. And the place to do that is on moist compost. And you just spread them out fairly evenly like that. Now, primulas are very fussy about the sort of conditions that you give them. First of all, it's essential to have light for them to germinate. So don't cover the seeds with compost now. You've got two alternatives. First of all, you could wait until you can see a little tiny root and then cover them up with compost. Or alternatively, do what I prefer to do, which is to cover them now with vermiculite. So this stuff will help them to establish, and it also lets the light through, so it's perfect. It's essential to keep them moist, so after you put the label in, cover them up with a bit of glass, and it's also important that they shouldn't get too hot. So put them in a cool, lightly shaded place outside. And in my garden, the best place is exactly where I collected the seed from. So if you do that sort of thing, gardening needn't be expensive, particularly if you stick to the old favourite plants. Adrian Bloom.
Mention summer-flowering hardy perennials to most gardeners, and they'll immediately think of some of the bigger families like the delphiniums with their regal spikes and bright colours, or even the brighter iris, particularly the Iris germanica or bearded iris, or maybe the peonies, the queen of the border with their luscious flowers and very attractive foliage at this time of year. But what makes perennials so interesting, in fact, is the wide range that exists among them, and we shouldn't forget some of the more lowly groups of plants, such as the knapweeds or cornflowers. This is Centauria montana, the mountain knapweed or mountain cornflower. And it actually was introduced into this country as long ago as 1596, so it really has been a part of our gardens for a great many years. An ideal plant for the front of the border, fairly low growing, but in the wild the colours of the flowers are actually mostly either blue or violet. But over the years, as one might imagine, selections have been made that have white flowers, pink, and also, well, close to a red. Well, so far you might say, well, what's so exciting about the mountain knapweeds? The pink isn't pink and the red isn't really red. But you wait long enough in the horticultural world and certainly something is almost bound to turn up. And in this case, it was with a centauria called gold bullion, aptly enough. This was a seedling which was discovered in the garden of Mr. Hervey Fielding near Oldham in Lancashire. And he actually had this as a chance seedling which came up and he noticed something different about it. What's different, of course, is its golden leaves, its wonderful golden foliage which starts off in the early spring and carries on through most of the year. And then later on you get these deep blue flowers and coming through and making a wonderful contrast. I think Mr. Fielding's find, in fact, is quite a little treasure and will be for many gardeners too. There's over 450 species of the knapweeds or cornflowers and over 200 in Europe alone. If you look at the origins of some of these plants, it does give us a very good clue as to how they'll do in our garden. Take Centauria dilbata, for instance, which originates in the Caucasus. It certainly isn't among the first rank of perennials. In fact, though it has attractive leaves and carmine flowers, it is rather invasive. But as always, other sorts will be found. And a closely related one, a selection called Steenbergi, is much more garden worthy. It doesn't actually run about the same and it grows a little bit taller. It has thistle-like flowers, which is not to be derogatory in any way. But in my opinion, these are such easy growing perennials, growing well on chalk and almost any soil, that they deserve to be more widely grown. My favourite perhaps is a closely related form, Hyperleuca John Coots, and that's somewhat lower growing, spreading, but has very nice deep pink flowers. For perennial lovers, this centauria really is the bee's knees. It actually also comes from the Caucasus, but it's quite different. It doesn't have the cut leaf, it has a broader, rather soft, hairy leaf and erect stems, above which you get these bracts. It's a plant that likes moist, richer soil. And actually these bracts are attractive even before they open to those startling bottle brush effect of the yellow flowers.
Now, there's a whole range of early summer flowering shrubs that are really good garden value. Things like Deutzia, Weigela, Kerria, Colquitzia, and this one, the mock orange or Philadelphus. Now, they're all really easy to grow and they'll flower for a long period. I've been enjoying a mass of white scented flowers of this for some time now, and I want to ensure that I get a continuity of flowering over the next few years. Now, the way to do that is by pruning. And what you need to do is to remember that they flower on wood they made the year before. So that's what you need to encourage. And you do that by pruning once they've finished flowering right down at the base. Now, you don't want to take all the wood out, and the rule is about 1 shoot in 3. So you look for the older shoots and you count 1, 2, 3 and just cut out that middle one. So you use that 1 in 3 method for all the shrubs that I've mentioned, including the Weigela. But just to make things complicated, there are a couple of exceptions. This is Weigela Florida Ruby Gold, and it's grown as much for its golden foliage as its flowers. But it's a difficult shrub to place because if you put it in the shade, the leaves go green, and if you put it in the sunshine, at this time of the year, they tend to get scorched in strong sun. So while you're pruning, it's important to cut out all this ugly old stuff as well. So you would take out the tips down to a strong young growth like that, and that will clean up the bush and make it look nice, but still do the 1 in 3 as well at the same time. Now with Weigela Florida Variegata, again, it's a slightly different matter. This one is grown mainly for its beautiful variegated foliage, and you can see that the young foliage is very much brighter than the old stuff. So in order to get a succession of that, once, say, every 2 or 3 years, it's a good idea to take out all of the old stuff right the way down to the base. And when you've cleaned that up completely, with all of them, give them a good feed and a good water, and they'll soon produce some nice, strong, vigorous growth. In 1990, writer Mirabel Osler moved to Ludlow in Shropshire and took on a town garden measuring 70 feet by 30. A year later, she set about creating an instant garden. And 3 years on, it's a lush, secret haven packed with wonderful ideas.
When I began the garden, my idea for the design was to start at the front door, to get a long perspective along the passage which is tiled, running into the bricks of the courtyard, and then going along here to the cobbled path which goes right up to the end. The path gets narrower by about 4 inches by the end. The steps narrow that go up, and then the 2 wooden arches are really very small, and finally the little false door which goes nowhere at the end is only 5 feet high. When I came here in 90, I lived a year without doing anything to the garden because I wanted to see what was going to come up and how I felt about the feel of the garden.
Mirabel Osler's first job was to dig up the small lawn and replace it with chipped bark 4 inches deep.
I found that the bark is wonderful. In the winter, it's like dark grated chocolate when it's wet, and in the summer it's like walking across cornflakes. The trouble with having a garden covered in bark instead of lawn means that I cannot have a bonfire in the summer or the whole garden would go up in flames. So my son-in-law made me this lovely circle on which to burn rubbish in the autumn. I did have a very disordered and overgrown garden in the country before I came here, where I didn't have flower beds. I tried making a garden without flower beds and just letting the roses grow out of rough grass in huge, great cottage-size lumps around the countryside. But here I really tried to do something quite different. And I like that geometric strength which you get from topiary, which I haven't got much of in this garden, but I do see it in other people's gardens, large gardens where topiary is important. I've always, by instinct, gone for the wildly unsymmetrical mess, which is how Vita Sackville-West described what she would do if she had a small back garden. And I feel for it passionately. And yet, because we had that in our country garden, here I'm trying to have a sort of mixture of both. I feel that the mixture of hard surfaces and artifacts and brick or stone or wood are the absolute complements to plants, and the two go together.
Have a great weekend. Goodbye.